Alright guys, welcome back to another IBRACORP video, and we're looking at our Unraid server. I'm going to give you guys a state of the play so you can see where we're at with our server at the moment. It's been a while. We've already gone out and put our comeback video, done all the sappy stuff. One or two parts that I missed in that video was all of our work and inspiration to come back should be in the name and loving memory of Disctor, our true friend and forever an IBRACORP founder. 2, I want a quick shout out to all of our moderators, team members and supporters in our Discord channel that assist us, and to all of our members in the community who support us, donate, be a part of the conversation, even just putting down a comment and sharing your awesome ideas on that last video. Thank you very much. Now, as promised, let's get stuck into our first video. What you're looking at is our server, our Unraid server sitting here in 2025. So what I'm going to do is go through the various different parts of our Unraid server, regardless of whether you're a new user to Unraid, an experienced user to Unraid, or you're just curious about seeing what the heck we're doing over here at IBRACORP with our server. I'm going to show you right now. Let's keep it snappy and let me walk you through so that when I start generating some more videos for you guys, you have a bit of context, you understand what I'm talking about, and then in those following videos, I'll be able to focus in on different parts and different subjects based on all the awesome feedback you've given us. If you have any more, by the way, drop them in the comments. All right, so here we are on the dashboard, pretty straightforward. We've already got an Unraid server set up. I understand that this particular server is very well developed. It's been around for a long time. So it's going to probably look a little full on to someone who's just started up their own server. So don't get too overwhelmed by the various different things you're looking at here. I will make sure that we cover every little thing that you're seeing on this screen in its own containerized video so that you can get your server looking the same way if you want it to be the same way, or to at least teach you on what it's doing. But starting with the dashboard, you can see I've got quite a bit going on this server. I only have one Unraid server. I've recently updated it, or upgraded it, I should say, last week to version 7.1.4. It's been up for about 7 days. I haven't experienced any issues with this version of Unraid. It's been very, very stable, and the team have done a fantastic job providing these updates, and more importantly, incorporating the feedback from the Unraid community to any sort of bugs or issues that have come out. So let's start by going down the left-hand side, the middle, and then the right-hand side so that we can keep a nice even flow. Up here, you can see all the details of my actual server. I found a perfect picture in the actual settings of Unraid that matches my rack, so to speak. Then we've got the details of my motherboard. Then we come down to our CPU and all of its details and what it's doing at the moment. Then we come down to the system resources section. We've got RAM being used up, all of our Docker vdisk size. I saw a comment the other day actually that I thought was really interesting, and one person did actually end up providing the correct answer. But if you're seeing your Docker vdisk size being eaten up, that should be a little bit of a red flag for you, because usually what that means is you have a container running that has data being built up inside of it that is not being mapped to the host, and so the Docker image or Docker file image is growing, and that will eventually eat up all the space you've allocated to the Docker vdisk. So keep an eye on that. If you notice that that actually goes up quite a bit over a short amount of time, you probably need to look at whether a particular container is starting to fill the Docker image up, or the Docker vdisk. In any case, that all looks good. So we move down to our network interface here. I've got multiple network interface cards on this server, so you'll see that come up a few times. I don't have any sort of fancy networking regardless. What I do have is redundancy. So if I lose a network card, I do have redundancy on another link so that I can access the server on a different IP address if necessary. Again, we'll cross that video in another time. I also have a UPS that the server is plugged into. Uninterrupted power supply for those that aren't aware. So basically, if the power goes out at my house, I have this really old UPS. It's a recycled UPS. It's nothing flash, but it gives me about, even though it says 30 minutes, I'm going to say honestly, it probably gives me like 10 minutes to not immediately shut the server down. And what Unraid does, which I really like, is if that percentage hits a certain threshold, which I have configured, it will start shutting the server down gracefully. And then, when the power comes back on, you can just turn it back on. But that really avoids a lot of the issues you might have if a sudden power outage takes place and you damage any of the data on your disk. Then we go down the middle section. You can see the containers I'm running. I'd really like to spend some more time with all the containers we've got going. I believe, in my opinion, and for my purposes, I have all the containers I need for quite a while. There's one extra container that I added in here recently that I really like for my use case, that I really want to show off to everybody as well. But just so that you can see what I've got running, I don't have too much. So if you've got a lot of containers, yours is probably going to look different. You also don't need all the containers I'm running. I believe, in my opinion, this is the core perfect engine base for containers on my server to do everything I need it to do. Get to some more on containers shortly. Now I don't run any VMs, so that's not a big thing for me on Unraid. Then you've got the shares. If you followed our trash guide or a hard linking video before, big thank you to Trash as well for helping us really make that video, guys. In any case, based on that video and that guide from Trash, all of our shares are pretty similar in the way he's described, which means that they're very clean, very organized, and it enables hard links to work really, really well. I will go back to the trash guides in a new video and freshen that up for everyone, so just stay tuned. Now users, you can see we've got the root user and then we've got an additional user here. Then we've got Tailscale plugin. Now I know originally, a few years ago, we were using the Tailscale Docker container. Please understand guys, at the time, the plugin didn't exist, or if it did exist, it was very early in its infancy. So now we have a plugin as opposed to the container, which means that it can run on the system level and not rely on Docker operating, which eliminates that risk. If Docker doesn't start or anything like that, we still have access to our Tailscale network. I will cover that as well because it is an awesome plugin to have. If you're a fan of Tailscale or you want an alternative to WireGuard, this is a great option. Then I have the disk location plugin, also a fantastic plugin because it lets me visually see where my disks are. If I highlight over them, it will tell me the serial or the details of that disk. It'll give me some extra stats, and I can also make this image match what my server looks like. So this is what my server looks like. It has 20 bays. I've only used 8, and I'll touch on that shortly when I get back to Docker containers. And now over to the right hand side, we see some more details. Now mind you guys, all this stuff is movable, right? So if you unclick and click in this top right section, you can shift all these any way you like. Okay, so yours may not look like this, don't stress. You can just move it anywhere you think works for you. So we've got our parity information. Obviously, it's one of the key parts of Unraid, our parity. If we've got an issue with the parity, we have an issue that we need to look at and sort out quickly, because without the parity, we're not really making use of redundancy and safety of Unraid. Okay, touch on that in another time in another video. Then we've got our entire array. So we're looking at our parity disk. I only have one. Honestly, if I had the money and the time, I probably would get a second parity disk as well, again for that extra protection. But I don't know what the price of disks are where you live. In Australia, it's an absolute rot. So I've just left it as one, and then I have all my other disks underneath that. And as you can see, chewing through space over the past couple of years, which then we've come down to our cache backup. I love saying this one. This one's a great one. When I first started the channel, you could not believe the amount of animosity mispronouncing a word could be, or even just pronouncing it from a different place in the world. Whether you call it a cache or a cache, I'm going to continue to call it a cache. This is what it looks like on my server. So I have a cache backup as well as the cache itself. So I have multiple different sections that are using that cache. Two large ones. That allows me a lot of space for my server to store stuff, especially when it's temporary and doing a lot of downloads before shifting it onto the array. I have another plugin which I think is awesome called Plex Streams. And just like the name suggests, it's just giving me a nice visual on all the streams that are currently playing in Plex. And these are all my family members, but they're, I can clearly see what they're watching and how it's going, if there's any sort of issues. It's not really for issues necessarily, but it gives me a quick glance anyway, just to see what's happening on the Plex side of things. And as the name suggests, again, we've got things like airflow. So with the airflow, I can monitor what the fans are doing, if they're doing anything at all. It's So that's our dashboard. Why don't we start looking into some other areas? We'll go into main real quick. This is going to be similar to what we showed you on the dashboard anyway. You can see our array, view all the different sizes of your disks, as well as your parity up the top. It's also going to show us our cache devices here. And again, we've got cache devices in backup, and we also have some cache devices as our primaries. I've created them into what's known as pools. So we have a pool here, and we have a pool over here as well. Now this is my main pool. This is the one that's most important to me. It has about 2 terabytes. Once they fill up, or to a certain percentage, the mover will then shift anything that is destined for the array over to these disks on the array. And we obviously have our USB stick, which Unraid is running off as well. Now the mover, obviously one of the most important things I think in Unraid, can be found here. If you want to immediately invoke it, you can also go to the schedule itself and adjust any sort of settings in here. Currently I've got it to run every day at midnight. Now I did have a plugin for this a while back that allowed a lot more customization and fine tuning. At the time when I think I upgraded to 7, it hadn't been updated yet, and so I had to remove it to avoid some issues I was having, and I just haven't gone back to look at it. So it may be fixed now, and if it is, I would love to cover that again. But for the moment, we're just going to stick to the built-in daily schedule. Now we've also got the favorites section. That means you can pretty much go anywhere into Unraid these days. Hit the little heart icon and it will favorite it and bring it up into this screen for you. Makes it handy for those really common things that you might want to be going to. We come back to our shares. Feel free to take a screenshot if you like. This is how I have my shares set up. It's very specific and very intentional. I honestly think this deserves its own video. Again, we've done it before, but I believe it needs a refresh anyway. But what you're looking at here is obviously our shares, but also the settings we have in what we want Unraid to do with the data on those shares, or in those shares, I should say. So for backups, for example, sure, store it on the cache, but when the mover eventually runs, put them on the array. I don't need backups living on the cache. Domains, I want them preferred on the cache. If they're on the array, move them over. ISOs, that's an interesting one. I don't really know whether it actually needs to be set up like that, but since I don't really use ISOs very much, I don't really bother to think about it. Media, obviously this is one of the biggest ones that matters to me on my server. When media is updated in the share, go to the cache. That gives us that really fast read write of an NVMe or SSD, then move it over to the array, because eventually it can just be read from the array. Keep in mind, guys, when it goes to the array, it's more protected as well, right? So you want things to be on the array where it makes sense, but things like app data, that is all of your Docker containers and information, and is constantly being read write and needs that speed without latency, keep that on the cache. We don't want to be moving that. We don't need to cover users. I think that's pretty self-evident. I mean, I can just click on it just to show you. There's our users. It really matters most when you're giving users permission to certain shares, and so this user has access to certain shares. Then you have your settings. Again, I don't think I can go through all of this today for you guys, but I will make sure we go through in a separate video. Today is the state of the game, state of the play, showing you what our server looks like since our last, video with you all. So just give you an update on where we're at. But if you wanted a quick look, you can just see here all the different various settings that you might need for managing your server. Anything to do with Docker can be found here. Don't forget to favorite stuff if you think it's important and you want to get back to it quickly, then you'll be able to find it under favorites. Plugins. Now this one I know a lot of people will be interested in. Feel free to have a look at our plugins. I'll slowly scroll through so you can have a look, and I'll quickly touch on them to let you know what they actually are. And we even have some updates that we probably should apply. Community applications. Without it, you're not going to have an app store or this app, icon that you're seeing here. We want that. That's where you're going to find all the awesome apps the community makes, or even from Lime Technology. Next is the Tailscale plugin, which I mentioned earlier. Definitely want to get that going. If you don't like WireGuard, they're both valid options, guys. Some people prefer WireGuard because people have some concerns with privacy, which is completely fair enough. And so they don't really like the idea of Tailscale. For me, I think it meets kind of in the middle, and I'm happy to take a bit of a gamble with Tailscale. Maybe one day that'll bite me in the bum. But for today, I'm happy with it. If you prefer WireGuard, don't need to install this plugin. Go ahead and use WireGuard instead. I'll make sure I cover a video that compares the two in detail and then sets up, shows you how to set them both up. Unraid Connect, again, some people don't actually like to use it. I like it, I don't mind it, so I'll keep it. Keep note of the author as well, guys, in case you find maybe an old version of something by a different author. Got App Data Backup here. I still use it even though it hasn't been updated in a while. Some of them you'll see haven't been updated in a while, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with it. It just may mean it hasn't needed an update. App Data Backup will back up everything in your app data, ironically enough, and put it into wherever you tell it to. We will do a video based on a lot of the feedback I got around the 3-2-1 backup methods and any other sort of backup strategies we come up with. So we'll cover it then. Underneath that, we've got community apps, the auto update applications, community apps, cleanup app data. This one is really useful if you have some old historic app data locations, but I will warn you, it can be dangerous, and the application warns you itself. Actually, the plugin does as well. If you go ahead and run it, always be mindful of what it's about to delete, because you don't want to delete a app data location that is actually okay. So that, just be mindful. This location is what we showed you on the dashboard. System buttons, gives you buttons up here like this one, the power button up in the top right, a whole bunch of other ones relating to our system temp that helps us monitor those system temps, system statistics, and system info as well. Then we have fix common problems. Now, if I was going to recommend any plugin for you today, it's definitely going to be the fix common problems plugin. I will do a video on diagnostics and fixing common problems, literally. And the first part of that video will be install this plugin, because from what I understand from some of the comments and feedback from users, that particular plugin is the go-to from LimeTech themselves as well. Yeah, so make sure you have that. Save yourself a bit of headache, and it's actually really handy. Intel GPU top, if you're using an Intel CPU and you want to be able to use the GPU functionality of it in order to do things like transcoding and Plex, this one's going to be more useful for you. So take a look into it. Again, it's a separate video. Plex streams, pretty straightforward, the one we saw on the dashboard. Some Realtek drivers. For my particular driver, whether it's applicable to you may not be, and may not even be necessary anymore. I'll have to look at it. It's been around for a while on my server, so I'll have to do more research on. And then the rest of them, we've got tips and tweaks and unassigned devices. Unassigned devices is probably the more useful one out of these two. They're nothing to do with each other, so unassigned devices has a completely different purpose. And as it says here, it uses UDEV to automate and share disks that are not part of your Unraid array. So you can add things like shares from a different computer or server into Unraid and mount them that way, as well as your remote SMB and NFS shares as well. Now that's going to be important when we start talking about things like Proxmox, but we'll get to that another time. So that's our plugins. Let's look over at Docker and see what we got going over there. All right, here's our Docker page, and I want to teach you guys a little bit of lingo, something I learned early on in my journey and was promptly corrected by the community at the time, who I feel like were a little less forgiving than they are these days. But when we're talking about Docker, Docker is the underlying architecture or infrastructure, okay? It's like saying Windows. Docker. Everything you run here is known as a container or a Docker container. So if you want to save yourself a little bit of face when you're asking for help or sending any sort of request into various different communities, not just Unraid, but anywhere you're referring to Docker, please don't call them Dockers. Trust me, if you get the wrong person on the wrong day, it just adds a little bit of awkwardness to the conversation. So these are our Docker containers. Have a good note. Let's go through them. Nginx Proxy Manager is our proxy manager. This is how we access our various services or containers from the web, if that's something we wish to do. Not every container should be exposed to the web. I did cover this in a more detailed video previously, and I will redo it again. But the next one underneath, and you'll see the way I've structured this, okay, and the way Unraid looks at it is from top all the way to bottom is the order in which it will start these things. So Nginx Proxy Manager starts first. Next is Cloudflare, which is our Cloudflare tunnel. Most, if not all, of my connections that do get reverse proxied are going via the tunnel, so I'm adding that extra layer of security. Most of you have commented in the comeback video that you really want to get into security and try and uplift that on your servers. I'm going to help you do that. Do understand and appreciate that a lot of people in the community still don't really like using Cloudflare for one, or Cloudflare tunnels, there are alternatives, and to be honest with you, I would like to know what those alternatives are as well. So I'll come back to you with a more detailed approach, but we use Cloudflare tunnels to help us establish a connection via a tunnel, and that tunnel goes directly from our server to Cloudflare, eliminating communication in the open from our server to the internet. Underneath that, I run Cloudflare Dynamic DNS. I run this for a very specific purpose, and that purpose is that I use NextDNS, which I think I should cover in a video one day because I do find it pretty good. Again, it's not open source though, but I really like it. It does just work. In hindsight, after using it for some time, I really would like a more open source approach to that, so I actually think I'm going to look at something else. But the idea behind this is, rather than having to manually update the IP address inside of NextDNS of my home location, I've got NextDNS pointing to a CNAME record, an A name record, and that A name record is updated by Cloudflare Dynamic DNS. Then we have Plex. Pretty obvious what that is. If you don't know, it's a media server. That's where we watch all of our stuff. One thing I do want to pay particular note to is the network that I run it on. I've seen comments in the past few months on various videos of ours, people having trouble, or after a bit of trial and error, realizing that custom Docker networks can be a bit of a problem. I don't know about you all, but I found the best luck running Plex on the host network. Okay, usually I would not recommend it, but with Plex in particular, I do find it the most useful to have it on the host network. All right, so it's going to get the server IP. I'm even going to show you our different shares here. This all relates to both transcoding as well as our hard link stuff. Pay a little attention to it. We'll cover it in a future video. Prowler is our indexer manager. Don't want to go into too much of that right now, but it manages all of our indexes for us. Radar will allow us to search various media in film format, but we're going to leave it at that for today. Again, I will leave the volume mappings visible so that you can see them for yourself. Sonar is the same as Radar, except for TV. Bazaar is for subtitles. Overseer, okay, and I have seen this before with some new starters in the arena. They're wondering what is a media requester for. There's even been some answers to that I think need some correction. Overseer or Jellyseer or Ombi or various other media request apps have a single purpose: to allow you or others that you share media with to ask for particular content. It does not automatically grab anything. It does not perform anything that is questionable. All it does is say, hey, user X would like this particular thing. That is it. The rest is up to you, or the rest is up to you and whatever you've configured. You can either go back to our old videos on this kind of thing, or we'll cover it in a separate video. Tortuli gives us awesome statistics on our media server and allows me to share that with our users as well. I find it really cool. At the end of the year, you might want to share what's going on with, how our year looked with our server. You can even have other particular apps plug into it if you like to pull that information and create things like, how Spotify has the year in a review sort of thing, and it shows your favorite songs for the year, and you can do things with that. So it's pretty useful. Commenter, awesome application. It was known as a different app previously, but it will allow certain types of media formatting, organizing inside of your Plex server, grouping. It's really, really handy. It allows you to come up with some really cool playlists and combinations and dashboard items that match your flavor and what you're interested in, or maybe your people in your family that use your server as well. Definitely needs a revisit. We'll do that in the future. Now, this one is the new one that I've recently put in. I don't really do too much on my server these days, but this one I really love, and it took me a little bit to get my head around, which means normally to me that I need to make a video on it, because surely I won't be the only one. So that will be the next one I make a video on, I think. What Maintainer does is, depending on how we configure it and the parameters we set, it will remove media from your server. Wow. Why would you want to do that? Okay, if you're like me and you don't have expendable income to keep buying discs, there is a point where you will have your discs become full. Previously, I'd have to manually go into my R apps and remove content from my server, figure out what was not watched recently, look at things like Tortuli to understand what hasn't been watched, and manually do that, and that is really time consuming. What Maintainer does is it plugs into all those different apps itself via API. It also allows us to set custom rules. So pretty much what I've got set up in here, I'll just open it up for you, is pretty straightforward. Anything that hasn't been watched in the last 365 days, get rid of it. I'm a simple man. This works for me and my users. If that doesn't work for you, great. There's a lot of customization options inside of this that allows you to fine tune that as much as you like, not just by that parameter of last watched, but that's pulling it from Plex, which is awesome. So I know if nobody's watched it in a year, get rid of it. I don't need it on my server taking up space. And then finally, we've got Qubit torrent running down there, which we don't really need to focus on too much for this video. And then we have a couple of other things that I currently have off, but have used in the past. Notifier, I've got currently off at the moment while I look at some things and try and get in contact with the developers again. Code Server, an awesome tool that allows, working on files on your server via the web browser. Really handy. But for security reasons, I don't like leaving it just running. So I'll only start it when I know I'm working on something and want access via the web browser. DisQ TV, pretty cool. Took a lot of work setting up for me, or at least understanding it. Once I got it understood, it was fine, which again means I probably need to make a video on it. But that allows you to set up basically TV channels inside of Plex, but using your own content. And that was awesome because I could set up like a kids TV channel for my kids. And so the content on there was dynamic and it would behave like a TV channel. Things could change. You could set up schedules and what would be on today would be different to yesterday. It was just really cool to kind of dabble in. And it takes us over then to VMs. Again, I don't have any VMs. We will make some more videos on those though, because it's been a while since I've made one in Unraid. And Unraid is quite capable of doing VMs. I just haven't really dabbled in it too much here. Here's our app store. This is where you're going to find all the cool apps that have either been highlighted or spotlighted by the community. Honestly, it's just like the central place where you're going to come and find new apps to try. If you're wondering how we decide things to make videos on, or even just try in my personal life here on my own server, there's times I'll just drop in, have a look, see what's trending, see what's on the spotlight, or just something completely random. You might come in here and be like, you know what, that sounds really cool. Like, what is Christmas Community? A simple place for your entire family to use to find gifts that people want and avoid double gifting. That actually sounds awesome. I'm going to use that. Then we come back to our Plex Streams tab. It's again the same plugin we showed earlier, but it's got its own tab as well, so you can kind of open it there. Here's the Stats tab. This falls in line with the Dynamics system statistics and gives you a lot of those system stats that you might find useful. In nice, easy to see kind of graphs, which I think is awesome. Then you've got your tools section. As the name suggests, it's a bunch of different tools for the Unraid server. We can do things like update our OS, my favorite that one. We can even downgrade our OS, that one too. You can modify things like your registration or look at your registration. This location will show up here, and various other settings that honestly all need their own video as well. But some useful ones, especially when you're starting off, when you do not have an established server. Okay, I'll make that very clear. This is when you're a clean slate and you're just playing around and learning. Docker safe new permissions could be useful for you. Go into it and understand what it does before you actually do it. Gives you all the explanation here. Okay, it will fix certain permissions, but do not do that if your system's already established and you've done a lot of messing about. You maybe have custom permissions in place, or you have a lot of data on there. Okay. Then the other part you might want to take notice of, especially when you're troubleshooting as a new user or even an experienced user, is the diagnostics section. Really handy. If you're dealing with Lime Tech support, probably going to ask you for this kind of thing. Useful to know where it is under tools and diagnostics. You can download that. You can even anonymize it if you don't want anything sort of private in there, or not necessarily private, but might identify you. So useful to know where that is. And the other one is your system log. You can actually look through the system log right here and see what your server is up to, if there's anything you need to be concerned about. Now, I never like looking at red, and so I take the approach of just pretending that I didn't see it, and I'll just go back to the dashboard and live my life happily ever after. All right, guys, that's the state of the play. That's our server living here in Unraid in August 2025. I know that was a lot to take in, but I'm really trying to demonstrate and show you guys where we're at with our server so that when we continue making more videos now, you have a little bit of a baseline of where we're up to, okay? Shouldn't be too much of a change since the last video we did about a year ago. However, it's worth just seeing where it's up to. And then as we went along, I picked out a couple of things that are useful to know as well. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for all the feedback you're giving me. I am noting it all down, believe me. All the ideas that you're providing have been noted. Whether they're good, bad, or ugly, it doesn't matter. The feedback is really important. Thank you very much. And we hope that this is the start of a new chapter with IBRACORP and how we can make your servers better. So if you have any more, drop them in the comments so that we know what they are. Think of things that you're really having problems with, have had problems with, and now you're an expert at and want, others to learn from. Let's do it together the way it should be done. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.